I am Jake Roberts, an ordinary man in a world full of extraordinary expectations. I have a stable job, a proud family, and a beautiful wife. I never thought that everything would change on a day like this, but when life changes, it often does. So, without warning, one evening, as I sat at a dinner table in a fancy restaurant in San Francisco after an important meeting, I received a call. It was Rachel, my wife. I don't know if you remember, but today is the day I'm on a business trip to LA. Her voice had some background music and noise around her, clearly indicating that she wasn't in a quiet hotel room. I could hear laughter and chatter from people around her. A vague feeling started to creep over me. "Where are you?" I asked. "I'm at a party with some industry friends," Rachel replied, her voice somewhat hurried. "I can't believe this. What's going on?" I felt a slight anxiety rise in my chest. "We met a famous TV star. He came to our table and we talked for a while," Rachel said somewhat awkwardly. "I can't believe it, but he wants me to use what we talked about." A wave of emotions surged within me. "What are you talking about?" I asked, trying to remain calm. "I'm talking about the hall pass," Rachel responded, her tone full of self-satisfaction, as though she was trying to make this sound like something normal. The words hall pass echoed in my mind like an alarm bell. In the past, we had discussed it at a party with friends when the idea was just a fantasy. We both agreed that it was just a game, a fantasy, nothing more. But now, hearing Rachel's voice, I felt something very different. "Rachel, are you kidding?" I managed to say, but couldn't hide the tension in my voice. "No, Jake, I'm not kidding. He's really famous and I think I'm going to do it," she continued, unaware of my growing concern. My heart sank. Why was she telling me this? Why did she think I could agree to this? "Don't you get it? What the hell are you doing? You're not going to do this, are you?" I shouted into the phone, unable to hold back any longer. Rachel was silent. For a moment before she spoke again, her voice softer. "I just want you to understand, Jake. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and I want to try it." I felt like the ground beneath me was crumbling. I couldn't believe what she just said. There was a time when I told her I would never agree to something like the hall pass. That fidelity was the most important thing in our lives. Now she wanted to destroy everything just for a fleeting moment of fun. "I don't want to hear any more, Rachel. You can't do this to me. You can't break everything we've built," I said, and hung up. A heavy feeling engulfed me. I couldn't understand it anymore, and perhaps I didn't want to. That whole night, I couldn't sleep. I stared at my phone, feeling each of her messages like a dagger to my heart. She had gone with that man, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. The next morning, when I woke up, I felt physically exhausted, my mind a mess. I called Rachel back, but she didn't answer. Disappointment surged within me. Part of me wanted to stay calm, but another part of me wanted to find the truth. I couldn't continue like this. I decided to do something I never thought I would. Investigate. After calming down a bit and collecting myself, I decided to dig deeper. I called Jack, my close friend, who I knew was involved with Rachel's business trip. Jack was with his wife on the trip, and I hoped he might have the information I needed. When Jack answered, he sounded surprised. "Jake, why are you calling now?" "What's going on?" "Jack, I need your help. She's not answering and I can't take this anymore. Do you know what Rachel is doing in LA?" Jack was silent for a long moment. I could hear his sigh through the phone. "Jake, I don't want to be the bearer of bad news, but if you want the truth, I'll tell you." The world seemed to stop in that moment. "Rachel went with that guy, and you know who he is? Chris Knight, the TV star she told you about?" My heart stopped. Why did she do this? Chris Knight, a star I only knew from the press, now the person my wife wanted to be with. Thanks, Jack. I hung up and started to feel a storm brewing inside me. I couldn't sit idly by anymore. I decided to do everything I could to follow what was happening. I couldn't let myself be the fool in this story. After the call with Jack, the anxiety inside me increased threefold. I couldn't wait any longer. I had to face the truth, and I was ready for anything. By evening, when Rachel returned home, I had a clear plan. I set up the camera in the living room, preparing everything to confront her. Every minute passed like a century, but I couldn't back down. When the door opened, Rachel walked in with a smile on her face, but as soon as she saw me sitting there, her expression changed immediately. "Jake, what's wrong? What happened?" I stayed silent for a long moment, looking into her eyes. "Why did you do this, Rachel?" She hesitated, then forced a smile. "I don't understand, my love. This is just an opportunity, a once-in-a-lifetime chance." "I don't care about that reason anymore. You've betrayed me, Rachel, and I won't forget." My voice was cold like an iceberg, sinking with no trace of emotion. The heavy feeling still hung in the air in the living room. I looked at Rachel. She stood there still, not understanding what was happening. It seemed like in her eyes everything was still the same, but in my heart everything had collapsed. "You can't do this to me, Rachel," I said, my voice turning colder, but deep inside I could feel the pain tearing me apart. "You know exactly how I feel about fidelity. You promised me we would never hurt each other like this." Rachel stepped closer, trying to take my hand, but I pulled away. The feeling I had at that moment was hard to describe. It felt like I was looking at a stranger standing in front of me. "Jake, don't do this," she said, her voice trembling. "You have to understand, I just wanted to try it once, just this one chance. I couldn't take it anymore." "Don't try to say this was just a trial, Rachel. He's not just a star like you think. He's an influential person and you're just his plaything. And this so-called hall pass you mentioned, it's just an excuse for you to justify your actions." Rachel stood silently for a moment, then continued, "You don't understand, Jake. I've always felt emotionally neglected. You haven't cared about me for years. Your work takes all your time and I feel like I'm no longer important." Those words were like a slap to my face. For the first time, I realized that not only was the betrayal painful, but the truth was that I had neglected her, not even realizing how much she was suffering. I stayed silent for a while, thinking about what she had just said. Maybe I had been so caught up with work and personal ambitions that I hadn't noticed how Rachel had slowly drifted away from me, but still that could never justify her betrayal. "How many more words will you use to justify this betrayal?" I interrupted, my growing colder. "You've hurt me, hurt this family, and you think I can forgive you?" Rachel flinched when she heard what I said. She was silent, then her eyes started to tear up. "Jake, I love you. I don't want to lose you, really." I almost shouted, "Do you love me when you can sleep with another man without thinking about this family, about me, about our children?" My questions came like a storm, sweeping away everything left in our relationship. And then I decided that it was time to act. Neither of us could go back, whether we wanted to or not. The next day, I couldn't sleep. Images of Rachel and Chris that night kept replaying in my head. My mind was exhausted, but I still needed to get clarity. I couldn't live in this deceit any longer. I decided to meet with an old friend, Max, a skilled lawyer who had helped me in some tough situations in the past. I needed his help to prepare for a legal battle. When I walked into Max's office, he looked at me with understanding in his eyes. "Jake, what's going on? You don't look so good." I sat down, throwing my phone on the table. I need help. I need a divorce. Max looked at me carefully. What happened? I found out my wife has betrayed me. She went with a TV star and I need proof, I said, with a disappointed expression. I want to do everything right, but I can't just sit back and let things go. Max thought for a moment, then spoke. I'll help you, but you have to remember this won't be easy. Rachel won't just accept losing everything. She'll fight. The next day, I received a call from Max. He had found some crucial evidence that could be used in the case, but I knew Rachel wouldn't let me win without fighting to the very end. When we faced each other in court, the atmosphere in the room was so tense that I could feel every breath I took. Rachel and her lawyer sat across from me with confident expressions. You have no concrete evidence. You're just basing this on your emotions to make unfounded accusations, Rachel's lawyer said, his tone sharp. I didn't answer immediately. In my mind, the images of Rachel's call and everything she had done replayed over and over. I had enough evidence to prove her betrayal, but I couldn't let my emotions override my reason. I needed to stay strong. At that moment, Max stood up and presented the evidence, a video call between Rachel and her friend, clearly mentioning her relationship with Chris Knight. The room went silent, and Rachel's gaze became frantic. It's not possible, she stood up, her voice trembling. You can't do this. Max continued to present more evidence, messages, pictures from Rachel's meetings with Chris, and even a signed photo from Chris to Rachel. Everything began to become clear, and the truth could no longer be hidden. After the trial, I felt exhausted and drained. This legal battle wasn't just about property disputes or custody, but a battle with emotions, with all the memories of a broken relationship. When I got home, everything seemed to have changed. Rachel wasn't home. She had gone somewhere. I didn't know what she would do next, but I knew one thing for sure. My life had turned a new page. I sat down, looking at the wedding ring still in my hand. Forgiveness is impossible, I thought, and I won't allow myself to live in lies anymore. This relationship was over, and I had to move on. The next day after the trial, Rachel was no longer home. She had left, leaving no note, no call, just a cold house and a sense of emptiness. I didn't know where she would go or what she would do, but deep inside I knew this marriage had truly ended. I sat alone in the living room, staring into space. Everything suddenly became silent. No more late-night calls, no more midnight talks, no more smiles or loving glances. All that remained were pieces of disappointment and a sense of betrayal. Not wanting the kids to be affected by this situation, I had sent them to their grandparents. I didn't want them to witness the scene of two people who once loved each other now standing on the brink of separation. I knew that whether they wanted to or not, they would have to face the truth, but I would protect them to the end, even if my life crumbled completely. In the following days, I didn't see Rachel anymore. She didn't call, didn't text, and I didn't dare disturb her. But during those days, I couldn't forget her. I couldn't erase the image of Rachel from my mind. I had loved her sincerely, and now I couldn't believe that she had betrayed me like this. Last night, I received a call. It was Rachel's mother. Jake, son, can you come home? Rachel needs to talk to you. I felt uneasy. Where is she? I asked, unable to hide my worry. Rachel has gone back to her mother's house. She hasn't said much, but I think you should go meet her, Rachel's mother said, her voice full of concern. She wants to see you and apologize. A feeling of doubt rose in my heart. Was Rachel really remorseful, Or was she just trying to salvage a little of her image in my eyes? I didn't know, but I knew that I couldn't keep avoiding the truth. Had to face her once again. When I arrived at Rachel's mother's house, my heart was beating faster than usual. Walking in, I saw her sitting on the couch, her eyes red, probably from crying a lot. The atmosphere in the room was heavy and the silence was strange. "Jake, I don't know what to say." Rachel looked at me with a pained expression. "I know I was wrong. I can't forgive myself." I looked at her, feeling a strange pain rise in my heart. "Rachel, do you think you can say anything to erase everything you've done? You've destroyed everything. This family, my trust, everything." Rachel lowered her head, tears rolling down her cheeks. "You don't understand, Jake. I love you."
"I really love you, but I was wrong. I was wrong to think I could live in a marriage without feeling neglected."
I didn't know what to say. I just felt like a person who had been drained, pushed to the edge. "If you love me, why did you do this? Why didn't you tell me about your feelings? Why did you go looking for things outside of our marriage to fill the void inside?" Rachel wiped her tears, trying to find some strength. "I know, Jake. I know I can't justify my actions, but that was the only thing I could do at the time. I felt forgotten, neglected, and when Chris came along, I felt like I was being noticed, loved again. The feeling I had was truly indescribable. Between the pain and the sense of betrayal, I realized that I couldn't change what had happened. I couldn't bring the past back. "Rachel, you say you love me, but your actions don't show that." I stood up, trying to stay calm. "I can't live in a relationship without trust. You've broken everything. You've hurt me, and you've hurt our family. Jake, I'm willing to do anything."
"To fix this, for you to forgive me. I don't want to lose you. I don't want to lose this family," Rachel said, her voice full of pleading.
"But you've lost everything, Rachel. You destroyed it yourself. Don't ask me to forgive something you don't fully understand." I turned away, walking out of the room, leaving Rachel sitting there in despair. When I got home, I felt like a stranger. Everything around me became dull and meaningless. The feeling of betrayal, of being hurt, is hard to describe in words, but what I realized is that I couldn't live in a relationship like this anymore. This relationship had died a long time ago and I couldn't revive it. A few days later, I decided to see a lawyer to start the divorce proceedings. I didn't want to drag it out any longer. I didn't want to live in the shadows of deceit. I needed to move on, even though it was difficult. On a beautiful afternoon, when I sat in the lawyer's office, the divorce process began, and I felt like everything had come to an end. Rachel called me, but I didn't answer. I didn't need to say anything more. When I looked around, I noticed that my family and friends had started to look at me differently. The people around me would never fully understand how I felt, but perhaps the outsiders would never know that in these battles, the cost is always very high. Divorce is not just the end of a relationship, it's a change of self. I've learned to face the truth, the pain, and the difficult decisions. In the end, I walked
Out with a sense of emptiness, but also a sense of freedom.